financial market. And because of those abuses, I'd say these are financial abuses of the system that is moribund, actually. The global economy now, yung growth niya slowed to 2.6% in 2024, which is well below the 3.2% average in the decade before the pandemic. The key drivers of imperialist prosperity since 1990s, global trade and global foreign direct investment, they are also weakening. They have likewise weakened. Global trade, for instance, saw a significant decline in 2023, which belied earlier notions that it was recovering momentum after COVID. Actually, the decline was even worse than the trend before the pandemic, which could be more difficult now to reverse given price increases, hyperinflation, and the geopolitical tensions. When you look at global FDI, or foreign direct investment, on the other hand, it fell to $1.3 trillion in 2023, which is the lowest value since 2009. As percent of global, as percent of global GDP, yung global trade has plateaued at an annual average of 57% of GDP. Yung FDI inflows worldwide have been falling mula sa peak niya na 2.7% of GDP in 2015 to just 1.3% in 2023. Kita ko yung mga mukha niya, itong ibon talaga, bumubula ng statistics. But the point here is, if the global economy is relying so much on the flow of trade and investments, that what we're seeing here is the global economy is slowing. And if a country just relies on that, on the global economy, then we have a problem. So pag ganun kasi, parang in capitalism, the response has been, okay, there's overproduction, okay, the growth is slowing, then let's lend money. I mean, just like earlier, Sunny was talking about, si Recto sinasabi niya na, household, consumption-driven economy. And household, 74% do not have savings. So that means that these households will borrow money as well. Take that situation to a national level, so ganun na nangyari sa buong mundo. And what followed the 2008-2009 crisis was rapid debt expansion, which has only worsened since the pandemic. Sa pandemic, ang dami ring utang, no? And global debt now, which is shown in the next slide, is $322.9 trillion as of the third quarter of 2024, which is equivalent to 326% of GDP, which means yung buong mundo ay may utang na 326% bigger than what it can produce as a value ng kanyang economy. And the rapid increase in public debt, because debt can be both private and public, ang remarkable dito, yung pag-increase ng public debt against economic slowdown. Yung nangutang ka, but your economy is not growing, that is alarming. And that is the trend worldwide, where global public debt reached record high of 97 trillion in 2023, one-third of which are from underdeveloped countries like the Philippines. And most alarming for these countries is how they will service foreign debt obligations amid weak growth, stagnant exports, and depreciating currencies. Halimbawa na lang, yung increase in interest rates worldwide are translated to underdeveloped countries having 26% higher net interest payments compared to 2021. Hindi tumaas yung net transfer, ang tumaas yung interest. And that's how debt becomes really unpayable in this system. The UNCTAD shows that 54 so-called developing countries, 38% of total count by the UNCTAD, allocated 10% or more of government revenues to interest payments alone in 2023. The Marcos Jr. administration allocated 20% of its revenues to interest payments in the first 11 months of 2024. So kahit pa dun sa average mismo na tinatawag ng UNCTAD na debt-distressed countries, lampasan ang Marcos Jr. administration. From 2020 to 2024, 48 countries on the UNCTAD count, home to 3.3 billion people, spent more on interest payments than on education or health. The Marcos Jr. administration's debt service of 2 trillion pesos in 2024 and 2.1 trillion in 2025 are higher than government spending on education, health, housing, and social welfare combined. Hindi talaga papadaig. Pagka pataasan, mataas. Pagpababaan, mababa. For over a decade, no, yung ganong klaseng crisis, the advanced capitalist countries struggled to overcome stagnation by more debt, no, through the expansion of money, quantitative easing, etc., which is a habitual debt-driven response, na it reinforces debt and financialization. So financial troubles in the next slide are reasserting themselves with greater ferocity. Yung next slide, ang sinasabi niya, yung financial assets na hawak ng mga financial oligarchs are already equivalent to 458% of the global GDP. Ito na yung dinidescribe, no, na the rise of financial oligarchy being more dominant and more powerful in the economy than other sectors. So, ang tansya, we are on the brink of another systemic meltdown before matapos yung 2030. So, maganda yung 2030, maraming mangyayari sa atin, magugunaw na rin yung mundo, di ba? Kasi di ba sa 2030 din, yung deadline na dapat bumaba na sa 1.5 degrees Celsius. At kung hindi ay, 14% of the world's species will be gone. After yung crisis, the 2008-2009 crisis, protectionist policies started increasing as economies, large and small, focused more on building domestic productive capacity at yung kanilang resilience to external shocks. After COVID, that trend accelerated. The pandemic lockdowns exposed the vulnerability of overly relying on global supply chains for industrial strength. Next slide siguro yan. 193 countries, 52% of them are from the G7 countries, have implemented protectionist policies. Anong pinagkaabalahan natin in the last 3 years? Cha-cha, no? Opening up further the economy, the Philippine economy, to foreign investments and foreign trade. So, a reordering is intensifying where, for instance, the US is threatened with China's economic rise. The latter has always been protectionist than the rest of the capitalist world. So, yung ganong tension, it increased even the declaration of the US to be more protectionist. So the second Trump administration is saying that America shall be great again. Okay, I've heard that before from Marcos Sr., that America's economic decline ends today. So that's the most candid admission of the imperialist crisis to date, no? From the hegemonic US itself. But to this ambition, the US is reshoring its corporations, subsidizing them with citizens' money, protecting corporate patents, raising tariffs, maintaining sanctions, etc., disparaging Chinese products, blah, blah, blah. Sa mga bansang katulad natin, For countries like the Philippines that rely on foreign capital and low value-added segments of global supply chains, yung mga ganitong disruptions create significant vulnerabilities, limiting access to critical inputs, technologies, and export markets. So, when we look at these situations, sabihin natin, this is the moment. This is the... So these are moments, therefore, for the Philippines to reduce its dependence on volatile global markets. Di ba? Bakit tayo umaasa? Bakit forever tayo umaasa na hindi naman tayo gusto? And instead, focus on strengthening domestic productive sectors, no, or capacities. This is the moment to make the strategic choice to prioritize developing Filipino industrial production capacity. Moment na rin ito na mag-implement ng strong national industrialization policy. Tapos nabanggit ni Sani kanina, the country is geographically, strategically located sa dalawang nag-uumpugang bato, US and China, to get the best of both worlds, maneuvering the US-China rivalry. You can ask for critical infrastructure, for industrial upgrading. Pwede kang, di ba? Ano ka lang, pwede kang humingi ng development aid and other investments in exchange for neutrality and non-alignment with either side. Actually, kahit sa ASEAN, pwede siyang mamuno ng Philippines. It can lead in shifting the ASEAN in upholding nationalism and greater independence. Ang problema yung ASEAN nga, it's a group of puppets and you're puppet to the ASEAN. That's the worst, no? Diba? Ano ba, in the ASEAN countries, what do we produce that we can exchange for the ASEAN countries? Diba? Wala. Kopi ko. Indonesia. Diba? We're just a consumer. So, that position, this can be also in the context of having South-South cooperation, no? Na outside the US or Chinese or Japanese or other foreign firms na located lang, no? in let's say in Thailand. No, this is about South-South cooperation. So these are moments, these are actually opportunities for the Philippines to have a national industrialization policy right now. Okay, the next context kung bakit siya talaga timely ay yung current Philippine conditions with two main features. May material basis siya, including available natural, human, technological, and financial resources. Meron siyang political context which is characterized by a strong people's movement and the current political and legal processes in which the people's movement has asserted intervention. So yung una, material basis. Okay, next. By population, the Philippines is the 13th largest country in the world. It's 9th largest underdeveloped country. That's setting aside China, US, Russia, and Japan. So this is a large prospective domestic market and productive labor force. In fact, 80% of the population are potential labor force. So we have a young population, intelligent, able-bodied, etc., etc. So yung potential na yun, lalong ma-harness, especially after meaningful income and wealth asset reforms, no? And also if adequate social services are provided. The country is among the most mineral-rich in the world and reportedly ranks 3rd in gold, 4th in copper, 5th in nickel, and 6th in chromite all over the world. 1/3 of its land area is suitable for agriculture with minimum intervention, which means that other soil types may still be cultivated if given intensive management support. Our discontinuous line is the longest in the whole wide world. And our territorial waters are abundant with marine resources, considered the center of marine biodiversity in the world, and is part of the Coral Triangle, a region known for its exceptionally high marine species diversity. Kaya, balik tayo kay Amado Guerrero. Mayaman ang Pilipinas is a very evidence-based research. And, okay, sige, move forward tayo. Philippine social movements are one of the most vibrant and consistent subjective forces in the world. Hindi ako nagyayabang. With colorful history of people's struggles and improvements, broad, multisectoral, parliamentarian, extra-parliamentarian, with socialist aspirations, progressive, revolutionary. The prominent and progressive left has also already drawn up comprehensive reform proposals to the government of the Republic to radically shift away from neoliberal prescriptions. Itong mga political forces na to are crucial for national industrialization. They're crucial kasi ang national industrialization, kailangan niya ng masisipag at matatapang na tao. National industrialization, no matter how we talk about it in this room right now, na parang napaka-aspirational, is a difficult path. And that's what we're taking. And that path needs these subjective forces. And they consist of the largest indispensable forces: farmers, fisherfolk, workers, and informal workers in the cities and the countryside. The youth, yung mga intellectuals and professionals, they have critical role in fostering the ideological and technical requirements for industrial policy. Kahit yung mga domestic MSMEs, no, yung mga and even some rich nationalists and open-minded government officials, they can also champion industrial policies that support domestic production and innovation. So, yung mga katangian na yun, these are again moments for the Philippines to take on the most pressing development challenge right now, and that is national industrialization, which is essential doon sa pinagdaanan nating pambansang kalagayan. Essential ang national industrialization in creating jobs, increasing family incomes, making the economy more dynamic and productive and stronger in overcoming external threats, and independent in facing an increasingly hostile global economy. So it is the most pressing development challenge. May urgency siya. And we'd like to share 7 pala yan. There are 7 elements of national industrialization. One is that Filipino industries should be the driver of modernization and technological innovation. Yung mga industries and enterprises should be majority Filipino-owned. Kasi hindi mo maasahan yung, I think this story has been retold, no? So there was this German who was using yung kanilang pencil. Ano nga yung pencil nila? Yeah. So I don't even know how to say it. So it must be, no? So naputol. Hindi, sorry, baliktad. There was a Japanese man using his pencil. So naputol. So there was this German guy who said, use this. And gave, this is true, this happened. Actually, I'm not making it up. So binigay, eto gamitin mo. Then the Japanese said no. Because if I'm going to use a German pencil, diba, it will kill the Japanese pencil manufacturers. So that is the essence of having Filipino industries, of building Filipino industries or majority-owned Filipino industries. The next element is that thoroughgoing agrarian reform with rural and agro-industrial development is the foundation of industrialization. Na yung rural sector bilang isang malaking palengke, no, for consumer industrial goods, bilang source of raw materials, bilang source of investable capital. Real agrarian reform and agricultural development will both support and benefit from industrialization. And when we say real agrarian reform, that's not just the distribution of land to the tillers, but also of a strong state supporting all the aspects of production and supporting price, supporting marketing, and even supporting the vulnerability to climate change impacts of our agricultural producers. Which brings me to my third element, a strong state intervention. Actually, as we were reviewing the elements of national industrialization, it seems that there's only one element. We need a strong state. We need a strong state that is bold, sustained, that can provide guidance, coordination, support, and protection, that has a strategic vision towards industrial ends and away from corporate-driven neoliberal policymaking. That's the kind of state we need, which we don't have. We need a state that has vast authority and resources. Nasa disposal niya yung mga rekurso. We need a state that has democratic accountability. And in this plan, government capacity should be also developed to implement state-led industrial policies, to run public enterprises, to get hold or to control key vital industries, unlike what's happening right now with our oil industry na talagang paubaya, no? Other nations na industrialized right now have shown this strength, have shown this kind of intervention. And maling-mali yung sinasabi ni Marcos na no, nations developed by trading. Diba sabi niya? Only a state can provide decades of discipline and focus to implement this industrialization project. Number 4, the state shall pragmatically use the widest range of policy instruments possible to protect and promote Filipino firms. Ano ibig sabihin nun? Trade, investment, tax, revenue generation, lahat yan. All these policies should favor Filipino industries. As much public and private effort as possible must be oriented to industrialization. Ang saya, di ba? You cannot just produce kasi trip mo. Kasi nandun yung, ano mo? Digital economy. No. It has to be for industrialization. Fifth element, it shall prioritize specific industries. So yung state na yon, magpa-prioritize siya ng specific industries. We have some suggestions, but these suggestions are based on also studies on ano yung available material, ano yung available technology and knowledge and skills na meron tayo. But these are also, kumbaga parang, pwede pang madagdagan. No? For instance, agricultural inputs, machinery and processing, pwede nating i-prioritize yan. Mineral processing, para magkaroon ng integration with the steel industry, information and communication technologies, renewable energy technologies of wind, solar power generation, nationalized utilities in power, water, transport, and telecommunications. I was having this conversation with the Dean of College of Science, Gani Tapang, and said, ikaw, anong unahin mo? Because we were having, we also had that conversation in IBON, unahin namin yung coconut industry, no? Oh. Kasi maraming byproducts. So I asked Dean Gani, sabi ko, ikaw, ano unahin mo? Sabi niya, precision instruments. Oo nga, no? Wala tayong pang-measure. Precision instruments, I mean, it's ang liit na bagay, but it catapults the whole industry. So, yeah, so we should prioritize specific industries for development. Number 6, the state shall uphold workers' rights and welfare. Walang kwenta yung national industrialization kung hindi sila ang bibigyan ng ng resources to provide social services so that they immediately improve yung kanilang welfare and the kanilang well-being, and immediately support industrialization with a more skilled, healthy, and productive workforce. Kaya yung food security program, for instance, ng Bongbong Marcos administration, it's so really, parang ang pointless niya. Kasi you pursue food security, mabubusog, so that you can pursue industrialization. And that should be, and yung pag-uphold ng workers' rights and welfare is also making the working people the center of governance. Sila yung nasa sentro ng paggogobyerno. Pito, last, is ensure the state should ensure that the national industrialization project is aligned with ecological sustainability to ensure long-term and sustainable and inclusive development, including pag-invest sa mga technologies that minimize environmental harm or maximize resource efficiency, prioritize local and sustainable resource use, decarbonize the economy, and protect ecosystems and the livelihoods that are dependent on the ecosystems. So yun, these are the whole elements, and wrap up, yes. At this point, So at this point, we desire a government that can declare all these things. So we can challenge in the coming elections. Mimili ulit tayo ng mga lawmakers and then 2028 leaders. Ang challenge lagi is to ask them to declare public and national industrialization, declare national industrialization as a major strategy. And no one, only I think the Makabayan bloc can declare that. So declare national industrialization as the major strategy for Philippine development. Reclaim, challenge din sila, will you reclaim and assert Filipino economic sovereignty, that's including repealing certain lopsided trade agreements? Will you institutionalize priority measures to promote national industrialization? Ibig sabihin, institutionalizing. You have councils, you have a department. The Department of Trade and Industry is also working towards industrialization. Will you give Filipino manufacturers immediate relief from decades of getting battered by neoliberalism, which means putting the Filipino first in terms of production capacity and other support, or even incentives? And lastly, institute redistributive policies. Kadalasan when you hear that word, it means taxing, taxing the billionaire, taxing the rich, and rechanneling those resources, not just to support social services, but to support social services towards, as an effort to national industrialization. Above all of these elements and steps, sorry, na-lost ako. Social movements, tayo, the organized citizens, have the crucial role in ensuring participation and inclusivity in rebuilding our nation. I think I did not emphasize enough that all of these 7 elements and even the desire to have national industrialization will not have future or will not have meaning if we are not relying on the strength, on the improvements, and on the vision of the Philippine social movements. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sario Guzman. I'm replacing you on the riser. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Is everyone alive? Yes. Parang hindi nag-lunch. Is everyone alive? Yes, okay. Thank you, Rosby, for that talk. Sabi nga ni Rosby, this is the moment for national industrialization, and this is also the moment for the audience to formulate their questions for the open forum later. You can use the extra space in the printed program for your written questions. But before that, we have several announcements. From IBON Partnership and Education for Development, or IPED, they wish to announce that the new year also means new books. IBON, under the Partnership and Education for Development program for IPED, produces social studies textbooks and journals that implement the DepEd curriculum from a critical pro-people perspective. The new IBON textbooks in Makabansa 1, Araling Panlipunan 4, and Araling Panlipunan 7 that critically apply the Matatag curriculum are now out in the market. You may check these out also at a book stand outside. And soon to be available are the English editions for 1, 4, and 7, as well as the new Makabansa 2, Araling Panlipunan 5, and Araling Panlipunan 8 textbooks. We are also planning to relaunch the IBON Social Studies magazine and journals for elementary and high school students. Our dedicated area coordinators will be with you very soon. Additionally, of course, if we have any social studies teachers, you may join IPED's Education Forum for Development for updates on programs and books. You may also send them a direct email to efd.direct@gmail.com. efd.direct@gmail.com. Of course, lastly, the IBON Bookshop is also available on Shopee, Lazada, and of course, the official pages of IBON Bookshop and outside. An announcement from the Council for People's Development and Governance, the Council for People's Development and Governance in the Defend NGOs Alliance is joining the Asia-Pacific Open Government Partnership Regional Meeting in a side event on the role of open government in protecting human rights defenders towards strengthening and enabling environments for people-centered development and governance. That's the importance of Oxford comma, guys. There's a need to pause. This will be on February 5, 2025 at UP College of Law at Bonifacio Global City, Taguig City, Metro Manila. You may scan, of course, the QR code for more details and register if you are interested to attend this side event. And now I'm introducing to you our performers this afternoon. Sining na naglilingkod sa bayan, or Art for the People, or simply Sinag Bayan, are cultural workers, theater artists, poets, photographers, writers, dancers, and visual artists who perform in schools, communities, streets, and other public places. They are artist teachers who conduct workshops, especially to the marginalized sectors like the fisher folks, farm workers, and farmers. And now, please, a round of applause to Sinag Bayan.
Hello, sound check. Magandang hapon po sa ating lahat. Kami po ang sining na naglilingkod sa bayan, mga artista para sa uring magsasaka. Kami ay nakikiisa sa panawagan ng mamamayan upang wakasan ang kagutuman at kahirapan. Habang patuloy na nagtutunggali ang iilan para sa kapangyarihan, patuloy na nakakaranas ng kagutuman ang mamamayan, lalo na ang mga nasa kanayunan. Walang sapat na subsidyo at suporta ang gobyerno sa mga magsasakang nasalanta ng mga nagdaang kalamidad na nagresulta sa kakapusan ng supply at pagtaas ng presyo ng pagkain. Kaya't bilang mga artista ng bayan, mahalaga ang ating paglahok sa pakikibaka ng sambayanan upang itambol ang kanilang mga panawagan para sa trabaho, nakabubuhay na sahod, tunay na reforma sa lupa at pambansang demokrasya. Muli kami po ang Sinag Bayan.
Ang aming pong aawitin, what we're gonna sing today, it's all about celebrating our martyrs who fought for food security and genuine agrarian reform. This is our time to celebrate their lives and to give praises to the martyrs who fought for their battles. And as Sinag Bayan, we are one with the fight for genuine agrarian reform, as well as with the fight to demand food security in our country.
Pamati ang kadlaw sang mga bata, bisan sa kapait, inpilit magyuhom dapulayon ang maniwang nga kalawasan larawan sang matuod nga kahintangan.
Waay unod ang kaldero kag pinggan, nagakinutoy, nagasakit ang tiyan, nagakurog, nagatig-a sang kalawasan, waay naluha, ipaagay ning kahintangan.
anak, may pag-asa pa sa ilalim ng araw. Kahit magkulimlim mga tala mo'y matatanaw. Kahit pa hindi mo sabihin, alam ko ang nararamdaman. Hina ng loob mo ay napapansin sa pagdaan ng mga alaala. Kung may oras pa bang papagitan, ilalaban ko pa ng lubusan. Sa iyong laban ika'y sasamahan, sa iyo ako'y maninindigan. Kalakip ng bawat biglas ay pagkalugmok ng mga ilaw sa kalangitan. At ang ani ng ating buhay ay pupulain sa bawat pagsubok at paglulumbay. Mabigat ang dama pero nais kang makapiling muli habang buhay. Kung ang pagpupunyagi ibig na magtagumpay, huhubugin ang aking puso sa paglaban sa buhay. O sa pangkapayapaan ang labis kong pagpugay. Kahit ilibing mo sa lupa, hindi na mamamatay. Kalakip ng bawat biglas ay pagkalugmok ng mga ilaw sa kalangitan. At ang ani ng ating buhay ay pupulain sa bawat pagsubok at paglulumbay. Mabigat ang dama pero nais kang makapiling. Mahapdi sa mata pero nais kang makapiling muli habang buhay.
And once again, UP Sinagbayan. Maraming salamat po, UP Sinagbayan. If you like their songs, they're actually available on Spotify. You may follow them, you may listen to them, you may support them in any way you can. I am inviting our speakers back on the stage. We will now be answering some questions from the audience later, but of course, ako muna. So, Sonny and Rosby, please go to the side of the stage. And also, we thank everyone. Please clap on yourselves or clap for yourselves because you're here this afternoon on a Thursday. Hi, welcome. Okay. Rosby and Sonny, please welcome to the stage our speakers.
Mic test.
Ayan. Good afternoon, Rosby and Sunny.
Tago mo nga. It's ecologically unsustainable.
Yes, everything right now is ecologically unsustainable. Okay, so meron lang akong ilang questions for you guys to answer, of course. Sunny, excuse you lang. Okay, so kanina we're talking about how every nation there is, the 193 countries are already practicing protectionist policies, right? And the Philippines is opting for more foreign direct investments. So, ang question ko today is, if we become protectionist, how long will it actually take us back to an actual and genuine golden age?
Hirap naman. Ako muna, magkape ka muna. Okay, ang daming assumptions nung tanong. So, actually, it's wrongly premised on going back because we haven't been there, no? Okay, so ibig sabihin, hindi ko rin siya masasagot in terms of years. In terms of, kumbaga, years lang naman ang sukatan natin, ano? Yeah. Pero siguro one inspiration probably that we can leave here is ito. Medyo mahaba yung years. Let's say from classic to modern capitalism. That's an epoch, no? So it's almost like more than 500 years up to modern capitalism. So we are now in modern capitalism beginning in the 19th century. But it only took, for instance, to reverse from that kind of dominance, it only took China to build its economy, its industrial strength as a socialist country, which of course definitely means protectionist. It only took China about less than 10 years to reverse all the feudal and semi-feudal and also the colonial structures na nandoon. And in those less than 10 years, mas mahaba pa yung panahon ng Cultural Revolution. Yung pagbabago, no, ng thinking, ng isip, ng mga goals ng mamamayan. So, when you say protectionist policies, parang we measure in terms of number of years. Pero actually, we put there elements. And these are elements cannot be measured in terms of the time. They can only be measured by the strength of the conviction and the vision that we want it. So, isang example yon, no? Now, if we look at newly industrializing countries, which hindi ko ibibigay na example. Hindi, wag na natin tingnan kasi they were really, fed as factories for the global economy. Pero kung nyari tingnan natin yung mismong industrial countries na capitalist, di ba parang to achieve yung kanilang mga social goals inside capitalism, they also needed citizens' movements. Di ba? Para, well, I'm not saying they're perfect, pero ma-achieve nila yung, as having protectionist policies, yung isang vision na maunlad at mapapakain nila lahat, yung kanilang citizens, will have social welfare, social services, etc. So for the Philippines, yung potential niya, if we only have that kind of state, I don't know, it's maiksi lang yung building natin ng industry.
Sunny?
It'll take time. Example lang, the last probably two industrialized countries that have been able to make that great leap forward into industrialization, siguro South Korea and Taiwan. They started 60s. There's no fixed number when you say you're industrialized, but I think it's fair to say when Taiwan and South Korea started their industrialization offensive, it took them about 20-25 years before they got that level of relatively dynamic industrial base. So that's about South Korea, Taiwan, talking about 20, 25 years. What Rosby was saying about China, from the industrial base over decades established in China, I'll never forget, in about 2010, 2011, China declared, they said, we're not developed yet, but we want to be a high productivity, high income, industrialized country by 2030. So China na yon. With that industrial base during the socialist revolution, socialist era, they said 20 years pa before we get there. Then I think a couple of years ago, they've moved a bit forward. Yeah, we're going to get the 2030 thing. 2050, new age of socialism. Point being, I think, it takes time. And point being, literally the only institution that can take the long view, it's not workers have to work by the day. It's not even capital or capitalists or businesses that have to earn their earnings in a 3, 4, 5-year business cycle. It's only the state that can look forward with discipline, with all the resources at hand, to focus all the efforts of the country towards something like that. So how long will it take? Benchmarking it to get a respectable level of industrialization. If tomorrow, President Marcos says, okay, national industrialization, I think those are fair time frames, 20, 25 years to get a decent level. Having said that, so important also to understand, this is going to be happening at a time that we've decimated our industry from the neglect over the past 40 years. So that's a bit of a parang force of gravity. Pero nga, I think ballpark, using the last great industrializers, honestly, after South Korea, Taiwan, no other countries industrialized, especially because when they industrialized by the 80s, globalization na. Not a single country can claim to have industrialized from the 1980s to the present. Promise. Not Malaysia, not South Africa, ano yan, wala yan. So I think, yeah, ballpark, 20-25 years. And the state has to take control.
Parang ang tagal pa pa. Nasa
Oo, buhay pa ako
20, 25
nun.
years.
Abutan mo pa.
Matanda na ata ko pag naabutan ko yun, no? Speaking of golden age, syempre hindi magpapatalo ang mga bilihin. Golden din ang presyo. So the burning question right now is, as inflation continues to rise, bababa pa ba talaga ang presyo?
Kakapi ka na naman.
Na-shook ang ating mga speakers.
I think, nangyari na ba na bumaba ang presyo? Okay, absolutely. Sige. Ang nangyayari lang, rebasing, di ba, sa economics. Iurong mo lang yung base year para maliit lang yung inflation rate, di ba, ganun yun. So, hindi nangyayari yan. But, lalo na sa monopoly, sa ekonomiyang katulad ng Pilipinas. So monopolies, there are bad things about 5 bad things about monopolies. They can sell inferior products at a very high price. They can increase prices without any rationale at all. Diba? And then they can monopoly sila, so they can gobble up other industries and just they can get all the support from the state that they support as well. So nandun tayo sa ganung lagay. You may be hearing also from activists, they say monopoly pricing kasi yan eh. Which basically is what we have in the Philippines is permanent inflation. So yun yung kalagayan natin. Permanente ang inflation sa atin. Kaya hindi totoo na pag sinabing, bumaba ang inflation, gumanda, o bumaba yung presyo. So it's always, prices will always increase under monopolies or under a trading economy na hindi nagpro-produce. So siguro dun sa tanong ni Kyla, I think the vision here also is that when we start producing our own consumer products or industrial products, mas nagiging manageable yung price. And when the state supports as well production and prices and markets, mas nagiging manageable yung price. Ngayon pag tinanong, so hindi na magkaka-inflation, magkaka-rollback ba? sometimes inflation, pwede niyong tingnan na neutral yan eh. Pag may inflation, because may nag-increase, no, ng production at nag-increase din siya ng kanyang mga materials na kailangan, etc. So, sana mangyari na yung inflation is not from monopolistic and from a trading economy alone, but from a vibrant and producing and very productive economy. Then we can be assured that the workers can manage also the price increases in their consumption.
And ecologically sustainable. Sunny, do you have something to add?
Ako short-sighted ako eh. Not in 2025. There are too many things working against prices falling. One thing is that because of the increased food import dependence, and actually, not mentioned there, the increased dependence on imported inputs, in all likelihood, the Philippine peso hitting near 60 or beyond 60 this year. At a stroke, imported food will be more expensive, imported inputs to domestically produced food will be expensive. So that's, in itself, that's I think the biggest barrier to food going down. Pero hindi lang actually food. Like sabi ni Rosby, we import everything. Kung magka-depreciation, across the board yan. All the imported technologies we use to produce any manufactured products, o the mga foreign exchange adjustments dun sa kuryente, sa parang ano yan, our import dependence from 40 years of debilitating the domestic economy, we're going to be paying the price, I think, this year. Pero last point then, apart from the very, very strong possibility that the peso will keep on falling this 2025, lalo na kung, whatever, Trump, aftershocks, all of that. Outside of all of that, the Philippine government even cut the budget for agriculture. You can't produce cheaper food if you cut the budget for agriculture and for irrigation. So parang, alam mo yun, it's problem upon problem, unfortunately. So not this year, definitely.
It's not ecologically sustainable. Sorry, I keep saying it because, climate change and everything. But before I open, of course, alam kong excited na ang ating mga audience for the open forum. I think marami silang tanong. Before I open the stage to the open forum, let me announce some announcements from Suki and Water for the People Network. The Samahan at Ugnayan ng mga consumer para sa Ikauunlad ng Bayan or Suki Network invites everyone affected by the price hikes to join a Black Friday protest led by farmers and women's groups Slim, presyo pababain, buwis sa mga pangunahing bilihin at gastusin alisin, sahod pataasin on January 24, 4:30 p.m. at the National Housing Authority. You may also follow them on Facebook and on other social media pages para makaantabay kayo on different tweets. And you can also follow us, of course, on social media. Yeah. So, from Water for the People Network, assert our right to water, fill up the Water for People Network's complaints platform, and let us face the water privatization woes together. Contact us if your housing association, community, or organization wants to join the fight to stop water privatization. And of course, don't forget to follow us on social media at IBON Foundation and use hashtags IBON Birdtalk, hashtag People Economics, and hashtag National Industrialization. Are you guys ready to ask your questions? Ay, isa lang nag-yes. Are you guys ready to ask your questions? Okay, you may line up na doon sa mics natin, sa mga mic stands if you're ready to ask your questions. A few reminders. With the time being so short and maiksi lang tayo magsasama ngayong hapon, please keep your questions short and concise, and please keep your answers short and concise. Thank you so much. So, who's our first ally?
Alay,
Yes?
alyansa ba yan?
First to raise your hand. There. Paki-introduce daw po ang organization and name before the question.
Hello. Ayun. So, good afternoon po everyone. I'm Angela po from Panatang Luntian. So, just a question lang din po on my mind since I'm also studying po political science. And there's a somewhat parang debate din in the international relations na parang sinasabi na that China is already experiencing its downfall economically. Parang may great collapse theory na tinatawag na China already reached its peak economic development, kaya parang yung pabagsak na, and dami rin naman ng manifestations doon. And especially other great powers then on where Philippines relies its economy, since sinabi rin po kanina na Philippines economy is mas reliant tayo to foreign. So for the speakers, how do you think it will imply to the Philippine economy as well if we are already seeing that big powers or big players in the international arena are already experiencing this kind of problem? Ayun po, thank you so much po.
Thank you, Angelo. The question being, how will it apply to the Philippines, knowing that there's decline in the big economic powers?
Alam nyo, if you do a quick Google search, Google nyo China collapsing, China peak, mga ganyan. It happens every so often. First ko nadinig, no joke, early 2000s. And then I think late 2000s after the global financial crisis, may ganun din. Meron din sinabi before COVID at meron ngayon. Point ko lang, every so often that China peak, China collapse, that narrative gets thrown up in the air. It's so hard to generalize about China. It's so big. They've done so well, so much for their economic strengthening. Set aside muna yung conditions of the mga ordinary Chinese. So parang ako, I take any new narratives of peak China with a grain of salt. Kasi honestly, there have been at least 3, possibly 4 waves of peak China, peak China, peak China over the last 2 decades. Having said that, China, I think, is also starting to face the same problems that the other advanced industrial powers did in 2008, 2009. Yung debt. So I think that is a reality na that basically market-driven, capitalist-oriented, although state-directed capitalist-oriented model of China, it is hitting it's hitting some kind of wall, which is true. So I think, will that mean some kind of crisis and it's going to collapse? Siguro look how the US is behaving. If the US is trying so hard to set up bulwarks against China and to isolate it, parang they don't believe China's peaking and collapsing. Kasi kung ganon, di ba, sit back, chill, watch China crumble, do your thing. Pero hindi eh. So sa akin, super indirect indicator, but if the US is taking China seriously, I wouldn't put too much weight right now on that peak China theory. Having said that, and the most important for the Philippines, we don't not only not know what's going to happen in China or the US or Europe or anywhere in the world, but we do know what can or should happen in the Philippines. So I think, if anything, any uncertainty about the global environment, any uncertainty, Trump, post-Trump, China, collapsing, whatever, we should decide accordingly. At ang very clear that weird, dogmatic, destructive, oh, let's just get foreign investment to come in, oh, let's just export, oh, let's just cut our taxes and do all that nonsense that they've been doing for the last 40 years, clearly dead end na yan eh. So sa amin, there's so much brain power in government. Sa NEDA, halimbawa, kasing trabaho sa NEDA for a year. Proposal ko, yung NEDA, gawing NIDA, National Industrial Development Authority. Di ba? Paabante, ayaw nyo paorong. Kung paorong, di nada. Zero. So, nada, sorry. Anyway, ang point ko lang, there's so much uncertainty in the world. It's so hard to navigate that if you're weak. So sana, learning from our negative experience of the last 40 years, keeping in mind things are just going to get even more volatile, and they have been for the last 14, 15 years, since 2008, 2009, is to get our domestic house in order. We need domestic-oriented development. We have resources. We have, kahit pa paano, despite it being debilitated, 20% of our workforce is still in agriculture. Kahit pa paano, almost 10% are in manufacturing. So parang, it's not going to be easy. It might take more than 20, 25 years. But if you don't take that first orientational step and then build your state capacity, build your economic capacity to have more aggressive measures in the future, we're going to keep sliding down. And it's going to be much worse for the Philippines, lalo na if China collapses. You know?
Whoa.
Daldal ni Sani.
Hindi na ako sasagot dun sa next question. Magkakape na lang ako.
Concise daw.
Oo, sige na nga. Okay.
Gusto kong dagdagan. Sorry.
We can
Hindi.
yap.
Hindi exact yung mga figures ko pero parang ang growth ng Japan last year ay ano lang, 0.4, no? Walang 1%. Ang growth ng Germany was about 1.7. US, 2, no? Actually, global ay 2.4 nga according to our ano. China grew by 5%. And slow down pa yon sa kanila. Everyone, ano naman, slowed down. So parang, slow down yon ang tiningnan nila is because medyo nagkaroon na sila ng yung, parang yung sinasabi kanina, not really hitting the wall, pero napasobra na yung kanilang real estate development for their rising middle class. So, hindi pa yon yung hangganan ng industrialization or ng industrial strength. So yun lang yung I'm listening to the question, but when you read yung iba pang statistics, parang chismis nga lang yun. Oo, parang kasi naalala ko noon, sabi ng teacher ko, kung gusto mong magka-bank run, ipagkalat mo, nalulugi yung bangko. So there is a herd behavior in capitalism, which is, you disparage the Chinese products for, being reverse technology na mamamatay yan after 1 year, mga ganon. Then no one will buy those products. And the same with Chinese strength or Chinese growth, no? Sabihin lang, ay, ano na siya, na-reach na niya yung hangganan. Yung imperialismo talagang nandun na siya sa isang unsalvageable crisis. Tapos, yung Philippines, gusto kong discussion namin kanina, parang may delubyo, tapos yung mga kapitbahay natin, sinara niya yung mga pinto niya. Let's say may ipo-ipo ba yun? Yung Philippines, binuksan niya. Tapos tinignan niya, what's going on? Kumusta kaya yung bahay na yun? Kailan kaya magbubukas yun? So, kontra-agos siya. Yun din pala yung gusto kong sabihin kanina dun sa industrialization question. Kontra-agos talaga yung Philippine government when everyone is, closing up to protect their domestic industries. The Philippine government is opening up ng sobra-sobra. And that is really stupid.
Thank you, Rosby. Taking questions from the other side of the world.
Hello, yan. Magandang hapon sa lahat. Ako si R.C. Garcia ng Societrix. Pakulo yun ni Gary Granada. Ang ibig sabihin ng Societrix ay Societal Matrix. Alawan man si Gary. Di ba? Yung una ay pagbati sa IBON. Kasi hindi lang ang IBON ay isa sa mga gumagawa ng researches na ganito. Siya lang yung nag-iisa na gumagawa ng ganito sa simula't simula. Kaya salamat sa inyo. Si Sunny naman mukha namang hindi tumatanda. Masayang ginagawa yung trabaho. Kaya okay rin, di ba? Pero siyempre, masaya akong makita may mga bata na kasama si Sunny. No? Isa lang na complaint ay kahit na ako napapaya sa clicker, no? Hindi ko maintindihan paano tayo magtatagumpay kung sa clicker pa lang may problema na tayo. Diba? Tapos yung pangalawa, yung projector, no? Yung screen natin, hindi ko alam, sa mga concerts, ang lalaki. Pero pagdating sa mga ganitong mahalagang pag-uusap, halos hindi mo mababasa yung malabo yung
Sinadya po ni
tingin
Sally.
ko may problema sa presentation ni Sunny kasi maraming graphs na nakaganon, di ba? Pero maliit pa rin kasi minsan nakapagbigay ako ng seminar sa Muntinlupa, Alabang, may isang hotel doon, yung buong talaga isang side ng wall ay screen. Sabi ko, ganyan dapat ang kailangan natin. No? Kaya asar na asar ako dun sa mga gumagamit ng TV, ginagawang screen. Sayang, di ba? Itong maganda, yung ganitong projector. Pero napakaganda pala ng lugar na ito. Salamat sa Institute of Biology.
Thank you po, thank you po, thank you. Yung question
Dalawa
na
lang.
lang po, sir.
Yung tanong, una ay sa unemployment saka underemployment. Sinasabi ni Sunny, mukhang hindi totoo kasi may contradiction, di ba? Ang baba nung unemployment rate, pero bakit ang daming mahirap na tao? Tuwi ako magbibigay ng mga pagsusuri, ang sinasabi ko na lang sa mga tao ay, sa aking palagay, yung datos ay hindi totoo. Para sa akin, ang unemployment rate ay mga 7 to 10% at ang underemployment rate ay 13 to 17%. Pag pinagsama mo yung dalawa, effectively, 30% ng ating workforce ay naghahanap ng trabaho, pagod na humanap ng trabaho, asar na sa kahahanap ng trabaho, o naglalasing na lang dahil walang trabaho. Pero siyempre, social volcano, yung 30% effectively ng labor force mo. Kasi yan yung mga nadadala sa rally. Yan yung maligaya pag merong libreng tanghalian. Wala kang gagawin, tapos meron ka pang pantanghalian, mas mabibigyan ng kulay yung maghapon mo. Di ba? Kaysa wala kang trabaho. So, ang tanong ay, una, ano ba yung employment rate at unemployment rate? Kung hindi totoo yung nasa gobyerno. Yung pangalawa ay tungkol sa national industrialization. Nung binanggit ni Sunny kanina, sabi ko, bakit? Nasaan yung agri? Tapos pinaliwanag ni
Osby po. Rosario Guzman po.
ni Rosario. Kaya pala, nasa pangalawa.
Yes,
Pero ang
po.
gusto ko lang sabihin, baka may problema dun sa terminolohiya kasi mukhang kailangan nating bigyang pansin yung agrikultura. Bagaman nakasulat dun sa number 2 mo, ito yung pundasyon. Diba? Pero dapat kasama dun sa titulo para mabigyang halaga. Kasi ako, tingin ko, ganito. Dapat yung UP Diliman, isara na lahat ng kurso, CD lang ang ituro. Kasi ang kailangan natin, mga aktivista at nag-oorganisa ng mga komunidad. Tapos yung UPLB, isara rin lahat ng kurso, agri lang ang ituro.
Tama po.
Kasi ang kailangan natin ay mga magsasaka na matatalino, na may doctorate, at saka mga CD, mga organisador, mga komunidad.
Thank you po,
Yun lang
sir.
dalawa.
Pwede po pa concise na lang po.
So ang punto ko rito ay yung agrikultura na hindi pwedeng manatili na pati kamatis ay ganito kamahal o nag-i-import tayo ng galunggong sa China habang tayo ay isang archipelagic nation. Bakit hindi ganun ka sentro yung agrikultura sa inyong programa?
Maraming salamat po. Sino po sa ating mga speaker una?
I-English ko yung labor para may click. IBON has no way to question the labor force survey. What we doubt about the survey is the definitions. Because if the Philippine government says you're an unpaid family worker but you're counted as employed, there's a problem there. If the labor force survey by its definition says that you're jobless but you're not looking for work, you're not counted as unemployed, there's a problem with that. So at face value, we have no reason to question how the method is implemented. We do have serious questions about the definitions. Kasi when we hear about employment, we want it to mean gainfully employed. You're working, you're getting paid. But that super basic definition is not the definition of employment in the labor force statistics. They count unpaid family workers. They don't actually consider if you're earning enough for the poverty line or not to count as employed. So categorically, they underestimate the level of joblessness on the employment side because, especially in the informal economy, 40, 50, 60% of Filipinos are working maybe a few hours just to get by. That's not being gainfully employed. Second point, in terms of the number of unemployed, They added a definition a few years ago in 2008. You're only counted as unemployed if you're looking for work and able to start work in 2 weeks. So if for whatever reason, like you're a discouraged worker, I'm so tired of looking for work, I'm not finding work, I can't find work, I'll stop looking for work. Oh, I'm so sorry, you're not counted as employed anymore, as unemployed. You're not in the labor force. IBON tries to compute according to the old definition that automatically adds anywhere from 1.5 to over 3 million people who were considered unemployed before the definition change, but now are dropped out. So I just want to be clear, we have no reason to doubt that they're making up statistics, but we have severe problems with the definitions they use, which overestimate employment and underestimate unemployment.
No more additions?
Doon po sa okay. Nawala. Yung po, doon, Rosario. Tapos doon nagbelyas, no? Actually, ano po, yung hierarchy yung elements natin, wala siyang hierarchy. At ang centrality niya pa rin is from an agrarian economy that produces yung raw materials niya for industrialization. So actually, ang gusto rin natin sa agricultural development ay magkaroon ng rural industrialization na kung saan ay ma-produce din niya yung sarili niyang mga makinarya, yung sarili niyang processing, etc., para magkaroon ng overall agrarian development. Hindi ko na-sense na wala siyang centrality sa NI. No? In fact, sinabi natin, it's the foundation of industrialization. And we just defined na yung agrarian reform should be not just the distribution of land to the tillers, kundi yung meron ding strong state support na i-direct niya yung mismong agricultural development towards industrialization. So yung mga, pwede rin nating ilista, ano yung mga rural industries that we need to develop at the pre-industrial stage nung ating proyektong industrialization. So napaka-central niya, dalawang bagay, it still is the single largest employer ng ating labor force, and it's still the largest market of consumer and industrial products. So hindi natin pwedeng pabayaan yung sektor ng agrikultura.
Thank you po. Before we take the question from the floor, there is a written question. Marami daw sa mga munisipyo ang nag-urbanize. Ano ang epekto nito sa agrikultural na industriya or pagiging agrikultural ng ating bansa? In English, a lot of municipalities are being highly urbanized and being built on infrastructures. So what is the effect of this, knowing that we are an agricultural country?
Yung urbanization deal ng dito na muna tayo sa Bongbong Marcos administration, and even before that is actually on real estate development. So ang definition lang nila ng urbanization is that magkaroon ka ng real estate development that is, or infrastructure that is favorable for business and favorable for foreign investors and the business of oligarchs. Real estate itself is an oligarch business in the Philippines, no? Na kung saan ay yung the Villar's and the Ang's Rason ay nasa infrastructure and real estate development. That definitely competes with agricultural land. It competes with agricultural development and food production. So yun yung, kung naririnig natin ang magsasaka ay kumukontra sa land conversion and reclamation, even in the cities and in the coastal areas, it's because that's the project of the current government. The project is to take these land assets, make them as financial assets in real estate, and not as production assets. So kung doon sa tanong na Actually, yung mga munisipyo, ano yan sila naman yung facilitator no, of this private real estate business, and they also gain from it. Kasi ang ganda nga naman kung, di ba, ganda nung ano mo, trinoma, burahin mo yung San Roque, sa mapa, gandang tingnan. And it will attract more investments. So, yung ganon, ano yung effect niya sa agriculture? Definitely, it competes with food production. Kaya, medyo hypocritical when you go into food security programs and you don't have moratorium on land conversions or on land, on reclamation. Medyo ano yun, parang, ayun, token lang, no, yung mga ganong proyekto. Kaya dahil ganon yung nangyayari, mag-distribute ka na lang ng food stamp, di ba? Or money to say na, oh, eto na lang yung pambili mo ng pagkain because we can no longer produce our own food.
Sunny?
Okay lang, I'm inhibiting myself because you told me to keep it short.
Before I take the question from the floor, please remember to keep your questions short and concise, short and sweet for the given time. Thank you. Yes?
Pwedeng dagdag lang, sorry, baka hindi ako ang migrante. Yung doon po sa tanong on unemployment, no, gusto ko ring dagdag doon sa methodology na binabanggit ni Sunny, that the methodology does not include migrant workers. Hindi na sila kasama sa labor force natin. So if you add migrant workers or even immigrants who left the country because wala naman talagang trabaho, that would even increase sa sinasabi ni Sir na 1/3 of the labor force population may be considered job-starved.
Name and organization.
Hello po, magandang araw po. Ako po si RC Placido mula sa organisasyong National Network of Agrarian Reform Advocates UP Diliman. So, sa mga taga-UP Diliman po, via President Advocate, join our UPD. Ang tanong ko po ay pagdating po sa presyo po ng mga bilihin. Parang kasi nalilito po kasi ako na bakit yung mga presyo ng lokal na products, kunwari bigas na locally made sa atin, ay mas mahal sa bilihin. Samantalang yung mga imported ay parang mas nagiging mura pa. Ano yung dahilan po? Like,
The question being,
Yeah.
why are the local produced rice and other vegetables are more expensive than imported rice and vegetables?
The usual explanation given why rice is so cheap from Vietnam and Thailand. Oh, because of the Mekong Delta. There's so much water there, so it's cheap to produce. That's only half the answer. Because if the government spent more on proper irrigation, you could actually improve your rice productivity. So for me, the simplest answer why foreign rice, especially from Vietnam and Thailand, also India, are so much cheaper than the Philippines because their governments spend billions of dollars to support their domestic rice industries. Especially Vietnam and Thailand, from the 60s, 70s, 80s, they have been spending a lot to develop a vibrant rice industry. They kind of rolled back a bit in the last few years, but that there's already the momentum for cheap rice there. Other side of the coin, the Philippine government is not spending on the rice industry. And my favorite example, most recently, is that President Marcos signed early December 2024 RA, I think 12078, amending the Agricultural Tarification Act. In that law, apart from that's created the legal basis for the food security emergency, it also said, I will increase the Rice Competitiveness Enhancement Fund from 10 billion to 30 billion. December 4. End of December, December 31, he vetoed the 5 billion peso increase in the RCEF. So in the end, he promised 30 billion. Even the token 5 billion, which is much less than the supposedly additional 20 billion, he vetoed it end of December when he signed the GAA. So what does that say? They don't really care about the rice industry. They care about putting a show of doing something about it. They care about pretending that, oh, we care about Filipino consumers, therefore we're going to declare a food security emergency. But if they don't put their money where their mouth is, those are all empty. All the claims of supporting consumers with Kadiwa, kailangan may sense of magnitude. Yeah, Kadiwa centers offer cheaper rice. Well, good luck if you're among the 1.5 million families who can actually reach one of the 500 or 600 Kadiwa centers. That leaves behind, by the Bangko Central's own estimates, 20 million families without savings. Okay, say maximum 2 million get cheap rice mo Kadiwa. What about the other 18 million families who don't have? And I think one thing, marami ako sinabi, pero one thing I hope you get from the Birdtalk, the government is playing an optics game. Let's ask the numbers, let's get a sense of magnitude. Because in all things, context matters. Yung halik, may halik na lustful, may halik na loving, may halik na token, may halik na panghudas. Why? Because yung kiss, a kiss is just a kiss. But the context matters. Libog ba yan, pagmamahal, pagtaksil, context matters. So kaya IBON made a big fuss about having all these mga fancy charts, graphs. I'm so sorry that you can't read them because context matters. The government is playing the populist optics game, pretending it's doing a lot. It's doing so little. Yun ang point ko lang doon.
Paano yung pahudas? Ayun pala si Sir. Dagdagan ko kasi siyempre, narayot yan. Youth, kailangan. Armasan natin yan. Alam mo, yung bigas from abroad, ganito, yung bigas, narrow yung market niyan eh. In the international market, no? That rice is eaten where it is produced. So, yung international market ng bigas, 6% lang of the whole global production. So, ikaw, Vietnam, ang ipapadala niya, yung best niyang bigas. So, can you imagine, best na niyang bigas yon and still cheaper than your sinandomeng. So, it's heavily subsidized, right? Ang problema, pagdating niya ng Pilipinas, it also doesn't pay for reasonable tariff. Pinabaan ni, yung sinasabi ni Sani na RA, inulaan mo lang yun, no? Google mo nga. 112. Hindi mo gayahin si Kapaeng, memorize niya. Oh, yun. Yung sinasabi niya, it includes reducing tariffs from 50% before under the WTO agreement. Binabsak niya sa 15%. So, ang nakinabang, di si Vietnamese, okay na siya eh. Subsidized naman siya eh. So, pagdating sa pantalan, at the port, who benefits there? Di yung trader, the cartel, the rice. Is it? Oo. So, that's also just to agitate more our youth, no? Na hindi ito parang equal competition just because, alaga yung Vietnamese farmer as compared with the Filipino farmer. Yes, yun yung basic difference nila. But the other thing is that the government has a policy of trade liberalization under Republic Act 12078. Yun lang dagdag ko. Tumagal tayo doon.
Thank you po. Taking questions from the other side of the world.
Hindi, amending the athlete project.
Yung mic daw po ni Sir.
Pero may RCEP.
Okay, good afternoon. Melchor Cayabyab from the Commission on Human Rights. Yun nga lang, disclaimer, ito po ay personal na katanungan para lang safe. Okay, anyway, aking tanong po ay regarding sa national industrialization, particularly doon sa strong state intervention. Mahalaga ito, kinikilala ko naman personally, para limitahan din at proteksyonan yung ating national interest against foreign interest, plus the same time limitahan yung greediness ng mga bilyonaryo sa Pilipinas. Pero ang pangamba naman ng ilan dito, lalo ng mga ilang human rights advocate, baka dumulo ito in the process na yung strong state intervention na bahagi ng national industrialization ay tutungo naman doon sa pagkitil ng civil and political rights. So ano yung protection against doon sa ganong klaseng pagmamalabis? Thank you.
So, to translate, strong state intervention is recommended. However, how do we ensure that the civil and political rights of the people are protected even though that there's strong state intervention in these industries?
A strong, responsible, democratic, pro-people state doesn't fall from the sky. There's so many things to do, so many elements to make sure that the considerable resources, authority, powers of the state aren't abused to benefit a few or abused to put down, repress the many. So what are the key elements for that? most important of all, you have to have an awakened public, citizenry, organized into mass movements, social movements, civil society. Without that external institutional structure, suntok sa buwan, punch the moon. Anyway, without those strong democratic forces outside, we can't expect those in power to have an epiphany and be nice. They've had so many decades to be nice. They haven't been nice. They won't get an epiphany and be nice. So you need those strong, super strong mass movements, social movements, civil society from the outside to be the foundation of democratic pressure. Having said that, it is also useful to get a few within the government that share the same perspective. It's nice to have champions for human rights. It's nice to have champions for rule of law, for transparency and accountability, because there's just so much you can do from the outside. So I think there's a very secondary role also for those within government to work with those outside. Third element, you need to have the institutions. So apart from the warm bodies inside and outside of government, part of the institutions are laws or processes. And if you don't have rule of law or accountability for the shit you do, for the people you kill, for the money you plunder, for the pork barrel you pocket, the government will always be abused. So para sa amin, you have to put all those things together. And I think if we get a government that is more or less behaved, that kind of has the people's interests in mind, and that are checked by the institutions, by civil society, mass movement, mass media, I think that's the kind of government you can not trust, but you can have a bit more faith, not faith, you have a bit more confidence that given them the powers they need to implement genuine agrarian reform, national industrialization, will be used responsibly. But yun nga, it won't fall from the sky, and for IBON, it's so important to be talking about this outside, because in all honesty, one of the biggest casualties of globalization and corruption in the Philippines is people giving up on the government. We cannot give up on the government. Let's work for a better government, including from where we are, from civil society, from social movements, from mass movements.
Thank you. Any additional? Okay. Miss Mia?
Hi, hello. Thanks for this. Questions for Sir Sonny and Ma'am Rosario. I'm Marie Manalili. I'm a member of AGHAM, but my question is coming from my positionality as a citizen of this country, a woman, neurodivergent, and also I'm a critical theorist, but I'm also a real-world practitioner. I'm a speech and language therapist, so my main sector is healthcare, which is very weak in this country, and it's weakening all of us. So my question is, I'm for national industrialization, but my question is, what is your vision of the national industrialization that you want? And what kind of governing structure do you envision for this and material conditions for this to materialize? And which positionality are you coming from, and why do you think that's liberatory?
Hirap naman.
Mahirap talaga siya. Ako rin tinatanong ko rin sa sarili ko yan.
Okay. I think yung ako muna. Okay. Yung pagbaybay kanina, how Sunny went through the whole condition and situation. No? It's the definition of the problem. And the problem is basically we have a declining economy, a productive economy that cannot produce jobs, and the families are so poor that they don't have savings. I think anyone in this room na maisip nyong zero yung ATM nyo is really not just, a vulnerability of sliding into poverty as you go out of this room, but also as your profession also and your background, it's distressing mentally. So ang vision natin is that we build a country, an economy that, first of all, will be productive for people's needs. I was in a forum, for instance, nung I was with Neri Colmenares of Bayan Muna. Ang simple lang niya sinabi, ang gusto nating ekonomiya, yung magproproduce ng kailangan natin. And I think that's the economy that the Philippines, with all its endowment, can do. Kaya niya yun eh. Kasi nandyan lahat yung kailangan natin. And we can also produce more so that people's welfare and social services and the government resources will be beefed up. Yung ganon. Okay. So, national industrialization that will be based on a productive economy that answers for the citizens' needs. And then after that, it's an economy that is sovereign from foreign dictates. Yung hindi kahit anong mangyari sa buong mundo, kahit magsara yung kapitbahay mo, chill ka lang. Wala kang inaasahan sa kanya. At in fact, pwede kang mag-forge pa nga ng cooperation kung sakaling siya naman ang mga ilangan. That's the kind of economy that we want to build. That's the kind of economy that the country can have. Yun yung gusto namin. The country has potentials for that kind of economy. Tapos, and lastly is that, yung nabanggit nyo nga, yung taken care of, yung social welfare ng kanyang mamamayan. Yung hindi mag-aalala yung mamamayan kung ano yung kakainin niya bukas. The citizen can pursue other potentials of their humanity. Kasi wala na silang iniisip sa kanilang mga basic and prime needs, no? So I think that's doable, that's achievable, and that's our vision. And also sa IBON, we're open. Are there other visions that you want to have that align with that vision? Are there other aspirations na gusto nyo? And adding to the question before this, a strong state intervention. Huwag kayong matakot sa salitang strong state. Matakot kayo sa intervention. A strong state intervention means that there is a strong civil society inside that state that is participating in that democratic governance. So that we have as well. So again, not just a vision, but it's something that we're already doing.
Sunny?
Hindi siya natuwa.
Okay. Thank you po. We're taking question from the other side of the room.
Good afternoon po. I'm Ellie from Muntinlupa. Part po ng Kabataan Party List Muntinlupa Chapter. Bago ko po ito itanong, isa po ako sa tatakbo, nangahas na tumakbo po bilang councilor sa District 1 ng Muntinlupa under Makabayan Coalition. Sobrang nakakaba po kasi I don't have any experience sa legislation, pero sa ilang buwan ko po na pagiging bahagi ng mass organization, nakita ko po talaga na kailangan. Ito po yung tanong ko. Ano po yung marirecommend nyo na strategy para makapag-generate ng comprehensive local data or statistics na tutugon sa mga isyong pangkabuhayan at pang-ekonomiya sa isang lungsod? Kasi parang ngayon po, fina-finalize namin yung aming platforms and parang yung research-based po na 1,200 family living wage ng IBON, parang we're thinking na hindi siya fit sa on a localized level. So, ayun po, yun po yung tanong ko na ano po kaya yung pinakamadali since papalapit na rin election, how can we generate a localized data? Ayun. And paano po masisiguro na yung data na yun ay mapapahayag namin sa paraang maintindihan ng karaniwang mamamayan at ng mga miyembro ng lokal na konseho?
What are your recommended strategies for a comprehensive
FGD.
local data gathering in a municipality? And that's also popular, can be popularized easily.
It depends. Sorry. It depends on what data you're looking for. So it's kind of hard to answer because it depends on what data is needed. Poverty, local health services, education services, wages. Wages lang ba?
Wages. Wages po. Well, may iba po kaming parte din po yan ng sinusulong namin na panawagan din. Pero parang focus kami dun sa certain na yung gagawin namin panawagan for wages. Like parang kung itatry namin na mas maging realistic, kasi syempre gagawan siya ng resolution. Parang 1,200 is, kunwari, 1,200 yung pinupush sa Senate. Eh hindi pa nga siya mapupush sa Senate, tas local pa. So parang yung tinitignan namin, how can it be more realistic?
Categorically, there is nothing in the official statistical system that you can use. There's no wage data at the local level, much less the government even bother, despite all the regional wage hearings, they don't actually get the financial data from the corporation. So categorically, there's no chance of getting anything even remotely relevant to wage profit data. So if you can get it from the government, where do you get it from? You have to do your own survey. You have to conduct a survey, actually even FGDs, but it has to be a scientifically designed survey with what wages are being received, what corporations are earning. Good luck with that. If there are unions, good, maybe they have access to financial data, but you need a proper, to get a bird's eye view, hindi lang anecdotal evidence, you need to get a scientifically designed random sampling survey to get what wages are and what corporations are earning. Pero specifically, I think, especially Muntinlupa, taga dyan na nanay ko, ang daming informal sector dyan. So even that, siguro, hindi wage-related yung demands ng informals. So maybe that's a different data set entirely. So ako, I think the most practical thing to do is get a mapping of the establishments there, which at least is available from the government. Do a sampling of those establishments, whether by size, by industry, by location, whatever. And then, if there are contacts there, get their financial data. But yun nga, that whole process will stumble if you don't get financial data, because unfortunately, most firms will say, oh, I can't afford it. But they don't show that they can't afford it. Regional wage boards, they don't submit financial statements. Hearings in Congress, they don't submit financial statements. Even supposed claims that kung kinakatokan sila ng PSA, they don't give financial statements. So I actually don't know how that will materialize, but it has to be firm level data for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And the last question please introduce yourself and organization.
Good afternoon po, Sir Sonny at Ma'am Rosario. So I'm John Maxwell Yalde, isa pong economics student sa Manila po. So my question is just short and concise lang po. As an economics student, how can we ensure that the learnings we gain are under the notion of pro-people and for the betterment of the country when the concepts and ideas currently being taught in our educational institutions are under a neoliberal agenda and are meant to serve the top 1%?
Wow.
May quick answer ako dyan. Maging mapaluri, mag-aral. Sa college ko, we learned, unfortunately, all that neoclassical nonsense. All my textbooks were all about neoclassical economics. How did I break from that? I also took philosophy. Philosophy trains you to ask questions. So sa akin, hindi ko tinake hook, line, and sinker yung all the neoclassical nonsense they were teaching me. Also because bored ako sa economics kaya ako nag-philosophy boring economics. But I think if you're an economics major, it is important to get complete familiarity with the terminology, with what's happening, especially because yung mga data sets will be using ganong klaseng frameworks. But I think, maging mapanuri. Does this actually serve yung needs for an economy that serves the interests of regular, ordinary, poor Filipinos? And then I think ma-realize mo, may saysay up to a point yung familiarity with economics. Just don't buy into the Kool-Aid na ito yung mangyari sa mundo. Kasi if there's anything right now that every economics student should realize, the fact that the US, one of the most advanced industrial powers in the world, suddenly thinks gusto niya mag-protectionist. That's your perfect example. Nonsense yung mga models, textbook economics na yun Because in the real world, every economic decision, every big economic decision is a political decision, and those models don't work once you introduce that political element. At sa akin, what's the economy for? What do those models say? They don't say actually much beyond the beauty of it's internally coherent, it's kind of fun, may thrill ka, parang crossword ang bubuo mo, but in the real world, it doesn't actually serve the interests of regular Filipinos.
Dagdag ko lang. Dun sa mag-aral mabuti. Kasi di ba...
Ba't ibon ka?
I was in a forum, no? Tapos there was a youth. Ako yung tinanong, ano yung role ng youth para, di ba, labanan yung imperialism, ganyan. So ako yung tinanong, syempre ako yung youth, no? Siya yung nagtanong. So sabi ko, alam mo, isa lang naman sinasabi ng magulang natin, guardians, o kung sino, di ba, ninong mo, nagkita kayo, kumusta ka na? Sige na, okay mag-aral kang mabuti. Di ba? Pero ano ba ang wastong estilo ng pag-aaral? Di ba? Ang wastong estilo ng pag-aaral ay yung pagtingin sa panlipunang praktika. You look at social practice, and then you go back to theory, and that theory, you go back to social practice. It's a reiterative process, no? So economics is a course that's basically research-based siya. So you always have social investigation, then you go back to that theory. So parang yun yung, and I'm happy you're here, no? Kasi yun yung sa classical approach eh. Hindi ka binibigyan ng critical thought na, tingnan nga natin kung totoo yung sinasabi mo na tumaas ang presyo dahil sa supply and demand. Makita-kita mo, meron palang kartel dun sa... there is a reality out there na pag sinabihan kang mag-aral kang mabuti is to find out that reality out there and then apply your learning and apply it correctly. So ganun yung isang pwede nating labanan. Tapos yung critical thinking kasi, kaya ko sinabing I'm happy you're here, yung critical thinking hindi nabubuo sa library eh. It's really in social interaction. It's in social integration that you develop critical thought. Ganon siya. Yun lang.
Thank you. Meron pa tayong last 3 questions. Yes.
Ito, sa mga nag-i-econ dito, example lang. When Trump said 10% tariffs across the board, maybe 20%, except for China, 60%. Lahat ng mga who bought into the neoclassical Kool-Aid, papalpak yan, babagsak ang US economy, inflationary, etc., etc. That's what the textbook will say. Pero, in the real world, hindi naman bobo si Trump eh. Weird siya, pero hindi siya bobo. Bakit? He knows the US has stuff other countries want. He knows the US, the world's biggest consumer market, people will want to keep selling to the US. Do any of the neoclassical models capture the political decision ni Trump? Mag-play chicken ako, mag-hardball ako sa inyo to get what I want? Wala sa models yon. And I think the biggest danger about this textbook economics, it's good to start framing things, pero huwag tayo magpakasya dun sa pag-frame na yon. Kasi mapapakipot, in the real world, hindi ganun ang mundo eh. And I think the question of power, the question of dominance, the question of playing hardball, hindi at all ma-capture ng mga textbooks yan. If anything, nalilihis pa tayo. Doon nga nabanggit ni Rosby, that textbook, supply-demand, may kartel na pinoprotektahan kasi may mga binabayaran ng mga kongresista, mga senador, local government. Alam mo yun, medyo it falls apart. So gusto lang ma-stress yun kasi I'm not saying na useless in economics. It's half my degree. But I'm saying it's for familiarizing and then move on beyond that to see what really works.
Okay. The next question is, in 2027, madideplete na ang malampaya. Ano ang impact nito sa bansa? What is the impact of the malampaya depletion by 2027?
In the first place, kasi hindi natin napakinabangan yan eh. Ang napakinabangan ng government dyan ay royalties, tapos and some oligarchs also gaining from it by half owning it along with Shell. So, ang maganda yung tanong eh. I guess inspired siya sa NI, no? Sa National Industrialization. Kasi we need those critical energy materials, no, para sa ating industrialization. And when we looked at the reserves of Malampaya before the Arroyo administration put it under contract and, under corruption, nung tiningnan natin how many years can it serve national industrialization, it's a long year eh. yung reserves natin doon. And then, now you tell me it's depleted. Anong impact natin sa bansa? Di ba parang, oo nga, no? But when it was being depleted by the oligarchs and by by Shell and by government officials, wala. Ang impact niya sa atin ay pagiging atrasado, kahirapan, underdevelopment. So, yun. It's a non-renewable resource that we just gave away, just like that.
Ako, fearless forecast. Pagpaubos na yan, dadaming brownout, parang nung Manila privatization, magkaka-brown out, sabi mo tao, oh no. Kasi ng gobyerno, naku, may power crisis tayo. Mag-support tayo ng private power producers to produce more. Fearless forecast ko, dadami yung coal energy natin. Fearless forecast ko, natural gas, dadami rin siya. Maybe importing natural gas. Fearless forecast ko rin, may mag-pitch ng nuclear power dyan. Bakit? Kasi lahat yan, hindi yan papatakbay ng gobyerno. Papatakbayin yan ng mga oligarchs who are in power. Aboitiz, the country's biggest power producer, former Aboitiz officials, nasa DOE, nasa ERC, nasa SALM. May nag-iisip ba dito, ang bait-bait nyo, na kung magkaka-power crisis, hindi makikinabing Aboitizes, with government resources, with government contracts, with all those weird onerous provisions? Hindi. So sa akin, fearless forecast, the crisis will be played up so the government, in its very abusive way, can use its resources to help their close business allies. Tapos, in terms of energy, fossil fuel talaga yan. Pinakamura pa rin yung fossil fuel. Baka sa Aboitiz, mag-bonus sila, maglalabas sila for renewable energy, etc. Pero heavily subsidized. Kasi although nagmumura na yung renewables ngayon, medyo mahal pa rin siya. So, fearless forecast, maglalabas ng pera ng gobyerno to make the oligarchs in the power sector even richer, even wealthier, even more dominant sa pag-monopolize ng kuryente sa Pilipinas.
Before I take the question from the floor, reminder lang po na iksian na lang po natin yung tanong. In the interest of time. Sir?
Yung tanong?
Yung tanong po. Diretso na po tayo sa tanong. Salamat po.
Yes, magandang hapon. Ako si Anibel Dia, taga UP, chair ng UP Workers Alliance at isang MA student in NCPAG, Public Administration. The question is, isa akong kawani ng UP Diliman na naglilika ng yaman ng bansa. Now, my question is, kailan kaya tayo maaalis sa tanikala nung kasabihang ang Pilipinas ay import-dependent at export-oriented? No, makikita naman natin sa PDP, Philippine Development Plan 2023 to 2028 ni Marcos. No, Chapter 6, sabi niya, natukoy niya, revitalize industry. At ito yung pinag-uusapan natin. National industrialization. No, Pilipinas at ang Russia, no, katulad, merong mayamang nickel at cobalt dito, no, sa Pilipinas. Pero bakit atrasado pa rin ang ating ekonomiya? San may problema? Kailan kaya mababaligtad ang mundo na ang Pilipinas na ay export-dependent, import-oriented?
The question?
Meron po kaming pag-aaral na binaybay namin lahat ng policy development plans, lahat ng development plans, no? Even beginning in 1947. So, binaybay. Alam mo, there are common things. Una, it really is to rely on the global economy. And fast forward to the PDP that's just been rehashed from one administration to another. I-find nyo po, find, replace, yung copy. Look for the word national industrialization. Or even for the word industrialization. Wala po siyang ganun. Kasi ang gusto, by policy making, the policy is ganito. You be open to foreign investments, so that foreign investors, the global supply chains, can locate in your country. You offer cheap infrastructure, you offer cheap labor and raw materials, and then dadalhin niya that corporation to another country where it's assembled somewhere else. Kaya tayo, wala tayong buo na ginagawa. So we manufacture semiconductors, chips, electrical wiring, busina. Sa atin busina, hindi. Sa Singapore, sa atin yata dati yung gulong. So that's a kind of global economy na gustong i-join ng ating gobyerno by policy making. Kaya tinawag tayong export-oriented. Yeah, export nga, pero you're just a location. You're not even producing vast exports para masabi mo that can catapult you to industrialization like what happened to South Korea and Taiwan. Ikaw ay location lang where cheap labor and cheap infrastructure is provided. So nung tiningnan namin yung policy making na, okay, that's one. Dapat ikaw ay maging EOI, no? Export-oriented industrialization. Yung isa pa nakita namin, heavy on infrastructure yung gobyerno. Heavy siya. Budget niya ngayon is even bigger than education, yung infrastructure. Bakit ganun? Kasi ito yung, it's a colonial government. It's pleasing, no? Foreign investors and foreign governments by providing nice infrastructure for them. And on the other hand, infrastructure is the source of its own commission. It's bureaucrat capitalism. Kaya I was attending this forum na nagsalita si Congresswoman Franz Castro. Pinakita niya na yung budget, ang laki sa flood control. And you know what? I had this realization. Bakit nga flood control, no, even from American times, ang infrastructure na favorite ng Philippine government? Because you cannot audit it. Diba? Once binungkal niya yan, nilagay niya yung drainage, di mo man ma-audit yun eh. So it's easily padded. It can easily be padded. And yet, pag umulan ng super typhoon, lahat kayo baha. So that's a kind of policy making, yung sinunod from one administration to the next. So it's really a very colonial government. It's serving the needs of the global economy and its foreign masters.
Thank you. We recognize the presence of our IBON Board of Trustees, Ms. Judy Tagiwalo and Mr. Francis Gialogo. We're taking the last two questions from this side of the room. Please keep it short and concise din po. Thank you so much.
Okay, fives from INS. I'd just like to get your comments or thoughts on the discussion on, given the international situation, kung unipolar, bipolar, multipolar po ba? Tapos or baka may thoughts kayo na we were never unipolar in the first place, etc. And anong mga batayan para sabihin yon at anong mga things na we can look out for para mas aralin siya? Thank you.
Thank you.
Ang usual na ginagamit na metric for polarity, yung share of the global economy. Sa ganon, actually, medyo stretching ito say na multipolar yung mundo ngayon. Bakit? Kasi yung US, more or less na-maintain niya yung kanyang 25 to maybe 28% of the global economy over the last 3 decades. Yung China yung lumaki talaga. From about 7-8%, nasa about 20+% na siya. Pero yung multipolarity, the term, gives the impression na maraming umangat. Pero yung pag-angat ng China wasn't very, very marginally at the expense of the US. Ang talagang naolats, Japan, Germany, France. So essentially, yung pag-angat ng China, kasabay nun, pagbagsak ng the rest of the G7. So sa amin, from that economic GDP perspective, medyo exaggerated kasi na multipolar mundo kasi from that one dominance ng US, yung China, siya lang yung umangat. All the others, humina. Even yung Brazil, Russia, India, South Africa, marginal lang sila sa global economy compared to that 20+% nila. So kung GDP, share of the world economy, mas bipolar tayo kaysa multipolar. Pero may political sense yung multipolarity. kung political sense na mas umaasta na ngayon yung mundo kasi may second pole na China na natatakot ng US, in that sense, walang quantitative measure for that, pero mas nag-iingay ngayon yung Brazil, Russia, Russia dati pa, Brazil, South Africa, Indonesia, and other countries. So in that political sense, may nagaganap na multipolarity. So para sa akin, na mahalaga doon, let's look at it from the political perspective. Yung Pilipinas can join the ranks of those na nag-iingay, na hindi tanggap yung dating US-dominated world order, hindi rin tanggap na maging US or China-dominated world order ngayon. Let's find their alliances, maybe in ASEAN, yun ang mga kapitbahay natin, tapos iangat natin yung profile natin. So I think medyo yes and no, but basically politically yes, economically, categorically no.
Thank you. Last question po.
Direct to the point po ako. Ako po ay representative ng Bunyog Pagkakaisa Party List. Ang ano ko lang po, matagal na tayong walang industrialization. At ang sabi nga yan, ang Pilipinas ay mahirap. Sa ngayon, mahirap pa rin. Ngayon po, alam na natin na walang industrialization noon pa. Bakit po, ano po ang dahilan? Bakit hindi binigyan ng pansin ng government ang industrialization sa ating bansa? Yun lang po. Direct to the point.
Thank you po. Bakit daw hindi binigyan ng atensyon ng gobyerno ang industrialisasyon?
I guess direct to the point din po yung sagot, no? Kasi the government that's sitting ay serving yung interest ng foreign investors, ng kanyang mga sariling, mga mayayaman, no? Sobrang mayayaman, na kanina binanggit na natin sa structure ng economy, ay kumikita talaga sila, hindi sa productive sectors. We have a comprador economy. Yan yung maririnig nyo sa mga aktivista, no? Ekonomiyang comprador, which is buy and sell, so which is basically just trading. So, pagka kasi ganun yung ekonomiya mo, tapos ako yung gobyerno, parang nakakatamad namang mag-produce. Di ba? Kasi kumikita na eh. Kumikita na yung elite, no, na pinagsisilbihan ng gobyerno. So I think the straightforward answer is we have a government that's serving elite interests. And elite interests sa ganitong klaseng kaayusan, which is a very backward economy, ay sure profit. The sure profit is comprador profit, no? A monopoly profit, monopoly pricing, yan yung mga nagpapayaman sa ating mga oligarchs. So in the process po ng ganong neoliberal policy making, kasi yun ibig sabihin neoliberalism eh. Liberalize your trade and investment, open up your public services to the private sector. The government should just be regulating, dapat hindi siya masyadong nakikialam sa profit-taking ng mga corporations. So, in the process, in the last 40 years, na ganun yung pinagdaanan ng Philippine government na hindi talaga nagbabago, hindi nagwawasto, ay nawalan tayo, no, ng industriya at nawalan ng isang vision yung gobyerno na magpursue pa ng solid industrial strength. I guess yung
Last question po.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Magandang hapon. Di ho ako makaakyat doon. Kaya hindi ako makapila. Si Judy Tagiwalo, 2 points siguro. Una, yung usapin ng national industrialization, may efforts historically sa panahon ni Carlos P. Garcia. Filipino first. Bakit nag-fail ito? Maaari sigurong ipaliwanag. Ano yung kondisyon na nag-allow sa gobyerno noon na magkaroon ng protectionism at bakit ito namatay? Pangalawa, pwede kaya idagdag doon sa magandang mga elements ng national industrialization, yung cultural, educational aspect, the importance ng maintindihan ng mamamayan ang benefit ng national industrialization at mayakap ito. Kasi alam natin, nung unang stages ng industrialization ng Japan, kahit Japan, made in Japan, madaling masira yan. Gusto natin Germany. Diba? Well, hindi nyo na naabot yan. No? Kasi telephone ken noon ang uso hindi pa yan mga Sony. Tapos dumating ang China, ganyan din ngayon, made in China. So yung aspect na yan, ng sense ng nationalism, dapat hindi nandyan ang social movement, I think, no? Pero even then, sa mga policies ng gobyerno should be an educational, cultural campaign for people to understand and to make sacrifices. Kasi magsasakripisyo tayo Hindi na makagamit ng mga branded. Hindi na tayo makapagkuha ng mga imported goods na nasanay tayo, lalo na may OFW. So yun ang tanong ko.
Thank you po.
Hati kami ni Rosby para hindi kami death stare ni Kyla.
Thank you.
The closest na nagkaroon ng national industrialization policy ng Pilipinas was yung Filipino First under President Garcia. Pero two important points doon. Related yung roots niya. Bakit siya nag-fail? Nag-fail kasi hindi siya thoroughgoing. Kasi it's not just enough to close the economy or to protect it or to limit yung pagpasok. Kailangan may suporta. Kung wala yung agrarian reform, yung nakwento ni Rosby kanina, kung wala yung ibang requisites, hindi uubra. So isang limitation ng Filipino First ni President Garcia, ang ganda pakinggan, pero it was more about closing, apportioning foreign exchange, pero wala yung agrarian reform and all the other support to Filipino manufacturers. Pero I'd argue, the second point, the biggest flaw of the Filipino First policy, Americans benefited from that. Kasi may parity amendment So actually, because of the parity amendment ng 47, American firms already in the Philippines benefited from the Filipino First policy because they already set up there. That's also the reason bakit hindi gaanong tinutulan or minor lang ang tutol at pinayagan si President Garcia ng US. Kasi Filipino First in name, but because of the parity amendment, countless Pinoy naman yung mga American firms So, yan. So putting those two together, bitin yung measures niya, wala yung other requisites. Secondly, the US ay nakinabang because they were here, hindi talaga siya, hindi niya sinet on a path of industrialization ng bansa. Pero last point, but notice, despite that, nagkaroon pa rin, kahit paano, ng Filipino industries. Steel, textiles, konting industrial machinery. So that shows how powerful yung protection to nurture Filipino industries. Sige na nga, nakinabang na rin yung Westinghouse, General Electric, pero kahit paano, may Jacinto Steel ka, may ang baaning yung sapatos, anyway, all those other Filipino industries nag-develop din. So sa akin, it's a good start, bitin, at may ibang nakinabang. But anyway.
Doon po kanina sa elements, medyo kasi ginaganong ka ng wrap up, no? Meron po doon kasing institutionalized NI right away. Parang gano'n. Immediate institutionalization of national industrialization. Kabilang po doon yung pagtatayo ng mga councils. Binanggit ko lang kanina, yung DTI dapat towards gano'n. Actually, kabilang po doon yung pag-build ng education curriculum that will really teach yung value sa bata, that yung desire, the aspiration for national industrialization. Sentro para sa NI na maiba yung curriculum natin mula sa isang commercialized na colonial or even walang critical thinking towards doon sa maunlad na science and technology thinking for national industrialization. Tapos meron siyang matibay na foundation on social studies, araling panlipunan, etc. etc. So nandun naman siya na isang laban din ng kabataan aside from asking for progressive education ay iturol yung curriculum para sa pambansang industrialisasyon na meron ding pundasyon sa reformang agraryo. Kaya yung kanina, hindi naman joke yun eh, yung joke pala yun, no? Yung CD na lang, wag naman. Yung, yung gawin ding sentro yung agrikultura bilang isang curriculum. Agrikultura at saka NI, sana ganon yung ating edukasyon.
Maraming salamat po. And before we go to our parting shots, we'd like to recognize the IBON BOT members that are here with us today. Si Dr. Francis Gialogo, si Miss Janet Silva, Miss Marion Tan, Miss Judy Tagiwalo, and the government agencies that are here with us today, the Philippine Statistics Authority, Commission on Human Rights, Department of Labor and Employment, National Anti-Poverty Commission, and lastly, representatives from embassies, the Embassy of Australia, Embassy of Finland, and Embassy of Norway. So, our speakers, parting shots po.
Sabi nga ni Rosby, bye-bye. Siguro pinaka-parting shot, we hope na mas naging clear ang national industrialization. Pero isang comment din sa last question, hindi siya yung only way, hindi siya ang endpoint na pangunlad natin. Yung national industrialization, siya yung pag-create ng material basis doon sa klase ng ekonomiya at lipunan na gusto natin. In current conditions, where we are right now, backward industry, in current conditions right now, dominated tayo ng mga foreigners, mahalagang step forward siya, pero even then, only sa material basis ng lipunan. I do agree na bagit ni Ma'am Judy kanina, we need that cultural revolution, we need that ideological change, we need the political requisites for industrialization. Mas economy na pinag-usapan namin dito, pero yung buong paketa naman nun, i-control natin ang lipunan, ang ekonomiya, para sa interest natin. Sa pangkalahat ng layunin na yon, malagang hakbang, and we'd argue, yung only material na hakbang forward, yung pambansang industrialisasyon. Kaya sana, mapati mo natin sa nakaramihan, sigilin natin yung mga kandidato natin dyan, sigilin natin yung gobyerno natin, kung pati yan, hindi nila inaasikaso.
Maraming salamat po. Palakpakan ng ating mga sarili for a very fruitful afternoon. We remind our cross-posters to stay para po sa photo op and other things. And snacks will be served outside the venue. You may enjoy yourselves. And this is once again, IBON Birdtalk, Yearstarter 2025. Maraming salamat po.
Salamat sa lahat.
Bukod sa bigas, tumaas din ang presyo ng kamatis sa mga pamilihan.
The COMELEC will start printing again official ballots,
describing the 2025 spending plan as suboptimal.
Agriculture and Forestry, which said nearly $2 million.
Its deeply destabilizing actions in the region are compelling the U.S. to